Hi everyone, welcome to the course. I hope you have understood the concept of promises. And today let's see one small project like how you can create random jokes from the help of an promises. And here we are going to use one API also to fetch that random joke. So what will happen, that API will every time generate a new joke, right? So let's for that, so that we can only focus on our concept of JavaScript. So I have already created this HTML5. In this I have added a title. There is h1 which says random joke generator. Then there is button. In button, on click, obviously we are going to get this joke, right? When we will click, something should happen. Right now it is giving me the error because I have not described anything inside my script file. Now this button, when we click on this button, it should get me a joke. Now to get me a joke, it should print somewhere. For that, I have created a paragraph in which I have given a ID of joke, right? So let's understand. First of all, just check this particular URL. This is the API which we are going to use to fetch the data to random joke. See, it has this type: general, setup, punchline, and ID. Every time you will refresh this page, you will get a new joke. See, you got a new joke. So this joke we are going to get whenever user will click on this button. So how will you get this? Let's check this. Let's create a function for that. First of all, you want to fetch the data from this particular API. For that, we have fetch method. So fetch method, what it does is it will help me to fetch the data, to fetch the JSON data. You know, this is the object, right? So this we call it a JSON. If you remember, I told you in some previous lectures that what is an API. So for that, let's create a function. This is the function to fetch this. ID is very smart. I must tell you that it already know what I am going to do it. Okay, so fetch joke is the function I created. Now what do I want? I have to fetch the data from this particular API. So I will use this method fetch, and inside this this particular URL. Now this particular fetch method will return a promise. Okay, this API will return me a promise which is in JSON format. The API response is always in JSON format. Okay, and that is a promise. It returns a promise which contains the data in the JSON form. So what you have to do is fetch always returns a promise. So we will use dot then, and inside it what I want to put is, I will say response. Okay, if I will get a response inside this, what I'm going to say is, if that, see, now there is one more possibility that this API will get fail and I will not get any response, right? So for that case, we need to handle that case also. So I will say response dot okay. So what this okay does is it will check whether it is returning me something or not. If it is not returning something, that means it is going to reject it. Okay, so I will say over here reject uh, reject network. I did not get the response. Okay, did not received valid response. Okay, else I will return, say return response dot JSON. So my API will return something in JSON format. So response.json. whatever we get from the API, we call it a response. Okay. After that, I will use the dot then. Okay. If first of all, this then is to check whether I am getting a response or not. Now, this then is when, let's suppose I got the response, I got the data from the API. Now, what I have to do with data? I have to say, if there is a data, then what do I want? I want console. Mm, I don't want to console. What I will say is resolve data. Let's use our literals. Data dot, what I want to get? I want to get this particular setup. Okay. So data dot setup plus my data dot punchline. Okay. So this is the punchline. Done. So this way we will be able to handle it. Now, if we are not able to get the response, so what we will get? We'll get an error. So this error will be handled by our catch. So we'll say reject and display error. Fine. Now let's call this particular method fetch joke, and we'll say if my promise got resolved. So in this we will pass our, we will use this joke, and what I want is I want to document dot. Now I have used something I called ID joke, so we will use this dot get element by ID, and in this I will pass my ID dot joke. And what do I want? I want to write something over here on my document, so I will say dot inner text is equals to joke, that print the joke, whatever joke is there. Okay. And if not, dot catch will have an error, and similarly document dot get element by ID, and it will print the error. So in error over here, in reject, let's say network error. Okay. Okay. So what we need to do is, we have used our fetch joke over here, but remember that we have our button over here which we need to use. So this method we need to call, right, so that something can happen on the click of a button. So what we will do is, we will pick up this whole thing and we'll put inside a method called get joke. Why get joke we have used? Because we have get joke called over here. Now let's pick this loading thing also and add it over here. And let me just format this. Yeah, it's done. So let's go and check. Click on this get a joke. See, it's saying loading. Now there is something which is missing. It is saying cannot read the property of undefined then. Okay. So now there are two things which we need to do. One thing, if you have a notice that I have directly used this fetch method just to tell you that this thing will give us error. Why? See, cannot read properties of undefined then, because this is a returning promise. That does not mean that we are not defining this return. this function is not returning anything over here. This is the thing I wanted to tell you, so that's why I did not use it. So what you will do, return new promise, as I already told you how you can return a promise. So this will have your resolve and reject, right? And inside it you can just put your this logic as it is. Now for this, remember that we have used our button, right? And in that we have on click method called. So for that thing we need to put this particular thing inside our function called, what is the name of this function is get joke. So we'll use get joke. Make sure that your function name is same as you have used on click. Now you can use this loading here, right? And let me just format this document. Now it's format. Everything is done. Now let's see what will happen if you will click on this get a joke. It is loading, and you got how come the stadium got hot after the game, because all of the fans left. So this is your response of the API. It does not mean that if you will refresh it you will get the same thing. No, because it's a random joke generator. This API, what it does is it will every time generate a random joke. So what happened over here in the code, let's understand again. I created a function which will return a promise, and this promise also I need to use fetch method, and fetch also returns a promise. What will happen is this API will get me a promise, right? Will get me a response, and this response is returned by fetch to then if this API will give response, then our JSON format will get returned. Otherwise, if it did not get any response, it will just throw the error. It will stop it over here. It will reject the promise, right? So if the promise got resolved, you will get an data, right? And in resolve, what do you want? You want your punchline and data setup to be here, and if it does not, it will reject it with the network error, right? And this function will be called when you will click this particular button. Okay, when you click it, it will say document dot get element. First of all, as soon as you will click this, it will show loading state which you saw on your browser, right? And after that you are calling this particular method inside it which will return something, and if it is resolving the promise, it will execute this particular thing. If it is returning or if it is rejecting the promise, then this catch will get executed. I hope you are understanding this. I will also tell you one thing to practice this thing, because in one go you will not understand it. You have to use it multiple times so that you can get the concept. When you will do it by your own, you will understand it in more better way. So this was your random joke generator. You will click it again, still it will give you another. But what if I will stop this Wi-Fi? Again reload this and now click it. See, you will get a network error because your Wi-Fi is now off. You don't have any internet. Remember, keep this in mind that your API will only give a response if your internet is working, right? So this is mandatory. Again, on the internet, it will start working. See, as soon as it will get ready, we'll click on it, it will load it. See, you got a joke. So that's all for today's lecture. Let's meet up in next. Thank you so much, everyone.